It is our tradition to give a blessing at moments like this. And we start it like this. Grandfather, Moanam, thank you for all things. Thank you for our families, for our friends, for people that we don't know. Grandfather, bless the spirit of all those that come here and all those that we're thinking about, wherever they may be. Bless the wonderful people who keep this historical thing going. These wonderful people who share their history with all ages, from young kids to the very old. Let them remember how valuable they are. And this troop of people who've come here to honor our family, Buffalo soldiers, people who were chased here, sometimes in a good way and sometimes not. Let us remember their legacy, how good they are to us, that they remind us that our history is truly important. We are blessed and we are honored to be here. Thank you, Grandfather. To'oya, to'e. Oh. Blessings to everyone. Thank you all for coming.
Present arms.
We just had a ceremony, a blessing ceremony, and what we were doing is providing good tidings and good blessings to everyone. All people that we know, people that we don't know, even our enemies, hoping that someday they'll become our friends, and that they'll see it our way maybe, or that we'll see it their way maybe. History tells us that we are never going to have the answers. We will be judged by history later. So our blessing was about the historical context of everyone having good in them. Blessings are for everyone. They don't belong to a culture. They don't belong to a person. And so that's what we provided today to honor the Historical Society, the people here that put this stuff on. You know, they're providing such a service of history, that history is beautiful, that there's so much to learn from it, and that they're keeping that alive. And I wanted to provide the blessing to them, for them bringing these other great people here to share their history.
Arms.
Well, my great-grandfather, Jack John Taylor, was a Buffalo soldier. He was with the 24th Infantry, and he was an interpreter for the tribe back in the 1870s and 80s. And, you know, lived with them learned all of their history, learned their backgrounds, learned all about their lives. How did they do things? Where did they do things? And he learned their language, and he was able not only to speak with them at their level, but also to speak with others about what their concerns truly were. And then in the 1890s, he ended up marrying my great-grandmother, Kitty Cloud, who was Chief's adopted daughter. So being able to convey all of that, that's what I've been able to do most of my life.
Start investing in something that's more, I'm more comfortable with.
So that one you said started out with the black powder.
Yes,
With
yes.
the
As you
flint
can,
then, correct?
yes, right there. As you can see, it says black powder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, these, of course, these are all replicas of everything.
Right.
I have been a member of this organization for 18 years. I joined the organization upon my retirement, and 18 years ago, and I have been enjoying every moment of those 18 years since. Our troop have 26 members, okay? 12 of them are mounted, meaning that they ride horses. 14 of them do other things. For instance, we have a 4-man ground crew, because during our horse performances, props have to be put up, and they have to be put up on time so that the next event can take place without much downtime. We have a group of infantrymen, which is 4. The ladies are infantry. The 38th Infantry, they're the ones who do the maneuvers with the long rifles and march in and march out. And then we have the sales side of it, the business side. There are 3 people over there, individuals, who man our tent where we sell items for fundraisers so that we can continue to move forward.
So these are only lollipops, and they're sweet. They don't actually have a sweet flavor.
Well, they look great.
I've been in education for over 40 years. You just don't throw that away. And I still had the yearning to express myself and to share ideas with people. And the Buffalo Soldiers of the American West has given me that opportunity. You want to learn something every day. It gave me that opportunity to learn. Thank you, Sergeant Bell. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how I, an old man as I am, got involved with the Buffalo Soldiers. I was a young man at the time. My sons and I were at a parade in Brighton, Colorado, which is where we live, where we're all from. And we were standing there, and the parade was going by. And down the street, I see these men in these color uniforms. And as they got closer, I realized they were African American men. And I said out loud to myself, who are those guys? And the Anglo guy standing next to me said, those are Buffalo Soldiers. Here I am, a history major, a teacher, had no idea about the Buffalo Soldiers. I knew right then that I had to know more. Our mission as the Buffalo Soldiers of the American West is to inform and to educate. We do that in many, many different ways. One, through presentations like this. The other one, through horse performances. And other times we do it through parades. I am First Sergeant Fred Applewhite, the proud First Sergeant of the Buffalo Soldiers of the American West. M Troop. We'll call M Troop because we ride different color horses. In the cavalry, every troop has their own color horse. For instance, A Troop may have gray horses. B Troop may have swords. C Troop may have blacks. And when they got to M, they ran out of colored horses. So we became M Troop, the famed Calico Company. They served in states like Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, North and South Dakota, Arizona, Nevada, Montana, Nebraska, and a place they call Colorado. As a matter of fact, between 1866 and 1888, there were over 8,000 Buffalo soldiers out here in the West. What did they do? They did whatever the United States government told them to do. They were soldiers. There are three theories as to how these men got their name. One, when the Native Americans first saw this new and different soldier in Montana riding across the plains, they covered themselves to stay warm with buffalo robes. And as they rode, and the natives looked from a distance, they saw they looked like buffalo. But as they got closer and closer and closer, they realized they were not buffalo at all. They were this new kind of soldier, Dutch buffalo soldier. The second theory is when they came into combat with this new and different looking soldier, he fought so hard and so fierce, even when mortally wounded, he refused to stop fighting. It reminded them of their most sacred animal, the buffalo. And the third theory is when they first saw this soldier who looked different. They noticed that the hair on the soldier's head reminded them of the hair between the horns of the buffalo. I will show you, but I don't have any hair. You know, the buffalo soldiers was commanded by white officers. When a white officer chose to command a black regiment, they would automatically get a raise in rank. And that was to entice qualified officers to command black troops. One officer was offered control and command of the 9th Cavalry. This officer turned it down. This officer chose the 7th Cavalry instead. This officer's name is George Armstrong Custer. And until this day, the 9th Cavalry is so glad he chose the 7th and not the 9th. I want to talk about the most important piece of equipment that a cavalryman has. Can anyone think of that? Raise your hand if you know. The most important piece of equipment for a cavalryman. The horse. Because if you're in the cavalry and you don't have a horse, what are you? Infantry. So that most important piece of equipment is that horse. And you better take care of that horse first. The first thing a trooper does after he unsaddles his horse is to get the curry comb. And the horse has had the saddle on him all day, and he's sweaty, and the dirt and the mud, and he gets wet and he gets hard. And you take the curry comb and you break it up. All over, you break that dirt off the top. And then after you break the dirt, you take your horsehair brush and you brush all that dirt out. So now his back is nice and clean for that morning. You check his hoofs. This is called a hoof pick. You've had rocks in your shoes before, right? And you walk and you go, ooh, that hurt. You know? Well, that happens to a horse too. And if your horse does like this, what is going to happen to you? You're going to walk. And you do not want to walk. So you clean those hoofs out. What are you going to do with them after it's clean? You got to feed them. They have to eat all night. So how do they keep that horse so they can catch them the next morning and not have to walk? A hobble, yes ma'am. The hobble, it's not brutal. You put the hobble front leg here, the other front leg there, and the colt can eat all night. And when you go catch him, he can't run away from you. You can catch him, take the hobble off, saddle him up, and you're good for today's ride. You know, as I said, you know, the horse was the most important part that a soldier could have. And I want to show you something. You know, we have fingernails and toenails. Well, a horse's hoof is a fingernail and a toenail. So you have to protect that out in the wild. And there are two types of horses. I always tell them that we have the semis who use these shoes. Oh, wow. But if you notice the difference in shape, see the difference in shape? You know why? Why? This is the front shoe. This is the rear shoe. If we take John Ward's horse and cut him in half, the heaviest part of the horse is to the front. The lightest part is to the back. So the front feet are bigger and wider. So the shoes are shaped differently. Not only on the semis, but on the race horses as well, the one that we ride. See, the shoes are shaped the same. Front shoe, rear shoe. Protect the horse. You know, a lot of people believe that when the cavalry was out in the field and they ran into a conflict, they just pulled out their pistols and rifles and started shooting. Very seldom did they fight on horseback. Very seldom. They preferred not to. So when the battle was about to occur, every trooper had what is known as a link strap that goes on the side of the headstall, which I'll talk about shortly. It hooks to the side of the headstall. And once you got ready to go into battle, you would take, the fourth soldier would take 3 horses to the rear. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. They go to the rear. And they would hook them with these when they got off. So the one trooper had 3 horses, the next trooper had 3 horses, and why do you think they took them to the rear? That's right. The Native Americans were not stupid. They knew if they shot the horse, you can't chase them. So they moved them to the rear to make sure they were safe. Didn't always happen that way because pretty soon they got smart to know if they're going to move to the rear, we'll just attack from the rear. Not hard to figure out, but that's part of it. I want to give you a little idea about part of the frustration and the positivity that came from being a Buffalo Soldier or any soldier out here in the West. You know, the United States Army believed in one size fits all. But when they came west, they began to understand that these soldiers were going to face temperatures that were -10 degrees or 110 degrees. What were they going to eat? What could you have that would be universal in Arizona and Montana? So the Army came up with 3 things. 1, beans. As long as beans are dry, they don't care how cold it gets or how hot it gets. That was a staple. 2, coffee. The water was so bad you had to do something with it. So coffee was the second step. And the third one that kept them alive, we call hardtack. Hardtack. Water, salt, flour. You know why I call it hardtack? Because it's hard. And it never spoils. This hardtack is 15 years old. And it's good to eat. Except 10,000 students had their hand on it. To enhance their meals and the coffee, the Army would issue what is known as brown sugar. And what the soldier would do would take his coffee, his knife, and shave it off into his cup. That way, when he drank his coffee, it didn't taste near as bad. still was nasty, but not near as bad as the straight water. But when you go traveling, if you are going to go from here to Trinidad, Colorado, what are you going to pack in? What are you going to put your stuff in? Suitcase, right? Buffalo soldiers didn't have suitcases. Cavalrymen didn't have suitcases. They have what they call saddlebags. And on one side of the saddlebag, you went your extra shirt, pair of socks, your housewife. You know what a housewife is? Well, you know, when they were out, they had to take care of their own clothes. You got a hole in your clothes, you pull your housewife out. And you sew it up. Housewife is needles and thread. You sewed your uniform up. That's on one side. On the other side, the most important thing, the information and tools you need to maintain your horse so that you can continue to complete your mission. So when the soldiers were out, and on a 5-day campaign, in this uniform, this was their winter uniform. This was their summer uniform. This was their spring uniform. This was their fall uniform. So when they got back to the fort and they pulled the uniforms off, generally they stood there by themselves. So they would have to take the uniform to the laundry. And that were those ladies, bless their heart, smart, who followed the cavalry around. For 3 primary reasons. 1, if you're in a cavalry unit, you're safe. Nobody's going to mess with you. Who's going to attack a whole company of cavalry? No one. 2, you can make a little money by taking care of the uniform. 3, you might be able to land a husband. 3 good reasons to be involved with the regiment back then, because females back then, your job opportunities were very, very limited. Very limited. And this was a good, safe, sound place for them to go. But once they were there, they would take the uniform to the laundry. And the laundries would take the uniform and lye soap. You ever heard of that? It's made out of animal fat and grease and lye. They would go with it, the clothing, with their little washing machine here. This is a washing machine. They go rinse it off, do it some more with the lye soap till they got it clean enough. Once they got it clean enough, they would take the clothes dryer. This is the clothes dryer. They'd wring it through there. So I don't want to wring my leg through there. Wring it through there. Once you got that, they'd hang it up. If they had a clothesline, if they're there long enough, they'd hang it up on the clothesline. If not, any bush would do. They'd hang it up in the bush. And once it dried, the laundry ladies would then get the prehistoric iron to start with. Heat it up, iron it. But then modern technology stepped in. And what they ended up with, a new creation. A steam iron. You take the top off here, put the red coals in here, put the water in here. As it drips down, you create steam. It comes out the side. Wow. Man, it's amazing. But I'm going to tell you the story right now about 3 Seminole Indian scouts who received the Congressional Medal of Honor. This happened in Texas, outside of Fort Davis. Officer by the name of Lieutenant John Bullis. They called him Whirlwind, because John Bullis was not afraid of anything. He commanded black troops in the Civil War. And he earned the reputation of no fight he couldn't win. But he was assigned by the post commander to go out and retrieve or find or locate 80 horses that had been stolen from a rancher. Billis was in charge of the Seminole Indian Scouts. Now, the Seminole Indian Scouts were those individuals, scouts, soldiers rather, who went down and escaped from slavery, went down into the Everglades, and lived with the Seminole Indians. When Jackson moved them out of Florida into Oklahoma, the African American part of the Seminole Indian Scouts went to Mexico. Because had they stayed, they could have easily been captured and put back into slavery. So they went to Mexico, stayed in Mexico for years, and then when the army came down, suddenly, you know, you come out here from Washington, D.C., you know everything. It gets dark at night, and you get lost. You go out on the trail thinking you're going to capture somebody. You have no idea where you are. So they figured out real quick, we better do something. So they realized that the Seminole Indian Scouts were down in Mexico. So they went down there and made a treaty with them to bring them back across the border. They were good hunters, because the army always needs to eat. They were good trappers. They were good trackers. They knew where the water holes were, and they also knew where the bad guy lived. Perfect marriage. So the army offered them land if they would, and pay if they would serve them as scouts. Sounds like a real good deal. So the Seminole Indian Scouts took that. But on this particular trip, Lieutenant Billis took 3 soldiers. Their names were Sergeant John Ward, Private Pompey Factor, and Trumpeter Isaac Payne. They went out searching for the herd that was stolen. The first day they went north, straight north, and they were looking to cut a trail. Because they didn't have no highways back there. They can't say, well, take Highway 52 and turn left at Johnson Corner, and you'll find them right there. They didn't have that. The only way you can find someone is cut the trail. You cut the trail. You go and you stop. They drove 18 miles that first day they rode, and they had a hot camp. They had, guess what? Coffee, beans, and hardtack. The next morning they got up early. They went north by northwest. Traveled another 16, 17 miles and stopped down in this nice little valley where they had water running through and plenty of grass. Why would they need water and grass? The horses had to eat. You couldn't carry it with you. There was no semi for you to carry. They had a cold camp that night. They didn't want people to know they were there. The next morning they got up and continued north by northwest. About noon, they cut a trail that looked like the trail they were looking for. So they followed that trail. For 45 minutes they walked, and they got close enough to see, and there it was. It was guarded by 30 bad guys. Whirlwind didn't care. He wasn't afraid. He said, hey, boys, we got them outnumbered. And they attacked. For the first hour and 30 minutes, they had control of the herd. And then they see the bad guys start to outflank them. And then they start to retreat. They start to retreat to get to their mounts. Once on their mount, Factor, Ward, and Payne took off up the hill. Ward looked back and saw that the lieutenant's horse had panicked, and they were closing in on him. John Ward said, hold it, boys. We can't leave the lieutenant. He whirled his horse around. Down the road they went. He picked up the lieutenant, and they took him off to safety. Because of those heroics, in battle, under heavy fire, John Ward, Pompey Factor, and Isaac Payne received the Medal of Honor. Jump put that back, please. And when it's over with, you can see their pictures. This is a company of Seminole Indian Scouts. And above Ward's name, you will see the symbol Medal of Honor. One of 18 to 23, depending on who you talk to, that was received. Now, when they were at the fort and they had a break, what did they do besides maneuver? March, 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 march. But they had some time off. And when they had some time off, they would perhaps play cards. Hey, young man, what's wrong with these cards? You don't know? They don't have numbers. Perfect. You know why they didn't have numbers? Most of them couldn't count anyway. But they knew that this spot was bigger than this spot. They didn't say this was a 2 and this was a 4, but they knew this was bigger. So that's how they entertained themselves. All right, let's talk a little bit about communication. Now, they didn't have walkie-talkies. They didn't have that. They didn't have newspapers, telegraphs out here in the middle of nowhere. So when they were in battle and they were fighting and the confusion was reigning and you wanted to reorganize, how do you get 75 men to go back to their own company? Well, there are 2 ways you did it. One, if you had a white horse and your company rode white horses, you went where the white horses were. How do you know when to do that? They would use the bugle. The bugle will give the command to charge, retreat, whatever you needed to do. The bugler stood next to the officer, and the officer would say, "Bugler, play recall." I tried that, it makes my jaws hurt, so I couldn't do it. Besides that, my spouse's teeth came out. That wasn't good either. But the bugle is how they communicated. Not walkie-talkie. Bugle. Everybody understood each bugle call and what it stood for. The other way they communicated is from fort to fort, they would send couriers. The couriers would put the bag on, mount his horse, and he would go. Rain, sleet, snow. A lot of times the courier didn't make it because their mission was to get the mail from one post to the next. If the river swelled and the courier, the soldier jumped in it and he lost his life, they wouldn't find him to the next spring. Sometimes that happened. But the mission was to complete the mission. They knew, these men they called Buffalo Soldiers knew that they are going to be judged. The whole race was going to be judged by how they responded. They knew that. They understood it. That's why you look around. They had the lowest rate of desertion. There are many reasons for that. But one is we will not desert because deserting the army, we're letting down our people. To them, failure was not an option. You talking about all in. They were all in. 100%. I want to talk a little bit about, as we advance down, a little bit about a soldier that's very, very special. This soldier joined the 38th Infantry in Independence, Missouri. Marched with his company from Missouri to Lyons, New Mexico, on into Colorado. It's a good soldier. Did his job as well as he could do it. He joined the army under the name of William Cathy. William was a good soldier, as I said. Always on his post on time. Very helpful to the other troops. But one day, William got really, really sick. And William had to report to the post hospital. Once in the hospital, the doctor discovered changes. That William Cathy was not William Cathy at all. William Cathy was actually Cathy Williams. the only documented female buffalo soldier.
So let me tell you about Kathy Williams. In 1844, Kathy was born in Independence, Missouri, to an enslaved mother and a freed father. In her adolescent years, she was a house slave. During the Civil War, her master died, and the Union Army came on the Johnson plantation and took Kathy and other slaves to Little Rock, Arkansas. Well, Kathy didn't want to go. She had been there all of her life. But the Colonel Benson said, you're going to be a cook and a laundress. So she had to follow him. But she's seen so many things. She saw the Battle of Peed Ridge. And then she's seen just fields and fields of cotton being burned by the soldiers. She saw the Confederate gunboat captured and burned at the Red River. Well, time went on, and the war was over, and the slaves were freed. But you know, after the Civil War, newly freed slaves and other Afro-Americans, jobs opportunity were next to nothing. They couldn't find anything. So they had to think, what will we do? Well, now there is the military. If I did that, I have a place to stay. I got to stay somewhere. Have education, little medical attention, and they had a pension. So Kathy thought, what will I do? I have to make a brighter future for myself. Well, you know what? When she was watching, when she had to go with the army, with them, she got to watching these soldiers. She said, I'm gonna watch these soldiers. Got to watching how they act. She said, oh, well, how do they talk? I mean, you can't go in there talking like this. How they walk. Just how they were acting. She'd been thinking about this a long time. So she said, I am going to do something. I am going to do a flawless performing act to change the course of my life. On November 15th, a Thursday, 1866, ooh, it was cold that day. It was cold. You know, she was dressed in her heavy, warm clothes. She had this big old hat, this heavy pants. You know, she was tall. She stood 5 feet 9 inches. So she said, I can do this. She walked into the Jefferson Barracks recruiting office. She said, my name is Private William Kathy, reporting to the U.S. Army 38th Infantry. She did it. She said, now I got to keep going. I can do this. You know how your mother said, put your mind to it, you can do anything. That's what she did. She could do it. Didn't want to get caught. But you know what? It's been said she had one cousin and a friend to help keep this secret. So she went on. She had to go everywhere with the infantry. They marched everywhere. As a matter of fact, over here, before she got in, when she was with just the army, you know, when she first got captured, they went clear from Missouri, Arkansas, all the way up to Washington, D.C. And then they got back to Missouri. That's where she joined the Jefferson Barracks. But after then, with the 38th Infantry, they went everywhere. They went, I'm not the best map drawer over here, but anyway, they went through the Santa Fe trails. They were Fort Riley, Fort Hayes, all around they went. And then they came on down further. In 1867, they went to Fort Sill, Fort Bayard, Fort Cummings, all this area was over 1,105 miles that they just kept marching, walking. Now, while she was there, she had to have a job. She had to be a guard. Well, you know what? Being a guard, she had to have learned something new. She had to be a marksman. A marksman had a steady eye and a sharp aim. Now she carried something like this. This is what you call a Whitneyville. It's 1861. This is original. And she carried one like this. This weighs 9 pounds, and it has black powder, and the barrel is 40 inches. So you know, when a soldier walked, they did 12 to 15 miles a day and carried everything on their back, along with this. It's kind of heavy for me, but she was tough. But you know, as the soldiers kept walking, like Ann said, they got sick. They kept getting sick. They got pneumonia, malaria. They had tuberculosis, smallpox. They just kept getting sick. And they did not have much medicine. They gave them a little medicine to keep them going, but they didn't want to get, the other officers did not want to get near them because they were dying. They were like, I'm not getting near them. So they had a little medicine, but not much. Well, through all this, Kathy was getting sick too. Or should I say William Kathy was getting sick. Now, it's been said, she had went to the hospital 4 to 5 different times. She went through all these things, but nobody was checking. She kept going to the hospital, but nobody was checking. I don't know how that worked. But anyway, this time she got sick again, really, really sick. And she was discovered that William Kathy was not that. She was Kathy Williams, the only documented female Buffalo soldier. Well, when the men found out about it, they were not too nice to her. They were mad. Who's this woman in here with us? But they gave her an honorable discharge and she got out. Well, time went on and she moved to Pueblo, Colorado, and she also got married. That didn't work out. She kept going, and then she went on to Trinidad, Colorado. And in Trinidad, you know, the sickness kept following her. By then, she couldn't hear. She had no toes on her feet. She was walking with this crutch like, you know. So when she got there, she said, now I'm gonna put in for my disability pension. So she went to the bureau in Trinidad. And she said, I'm gonna apply for my disability pension. He said, you're gonna do what? She said, I need my disability pension. He said, now women are not in the military. But I was William Kathy. Well, you're gonna have to prove that. And then tell me some other things. He said, I got to look, he said, I'm looking on this thing. I do say William Kathy. But there's nobody in here said that they couldn't hear and don't have no toes and been sick. None of that's written down. Well, none of it was written down because nobody came near her to check her all these times she's in the hospital. Nothing. She said, you know what? I got deaf when I had to swim across the Rio Grande River going to New Mexico. I lost my feet because it was frostbitten. He said, now none of these things are written down here, and you are not getting this disability. So she did not get her disability pension after all these years. And that's Kathy. After time went on, she was still there in Trinidad as far as they can tell, and she did pass away. But that was how Kathy did it. It was just, to me, I thought she was an amazing woman that She was a star in the West. She had done all of this. And, I got thinking about, how do you talk to somebody and tell them your dream, your thoughts, if you got to keeping all this inside? You can't tell nobody who you are. But that's what she did. So Kathy's motivation was she had to make her life better. And that's when she said, I'm gonna be a soldier. And she did it. And I like to tell the story because I want everyone to know all the history about her and the Buffalo Soldiers. My father was a Buffalo Soldier. My brother started research, and he started all about the Buffalo Soldiers. He's found out all kinds of things about them, and he wanted to tell the story. So, being his sister, I didn't have much choice. I was in it also, but I enjoy the education of telling people all about something that happened in history that no one knew about.
When we come and present a program, we want to teach the people more about the Buffalo Soldiers today than they knew before they came in here. We know that they know something about the soldiers. Maybe some of them heard about them, maybe some of them haven't. And we want to make sure that they have enough information to be able to have a good conversation about Buffalo Soldiers. It's important to me because I was asked by two gentlemen, my father and a man by the R.T. Williams, to tell their story. And I promised them that I would, not knowing that it would take me 40 years of research and travel to help tell the story. My dad asked me a question when I was sitting at home on the couch. And he said, "Son, what did you learn about Buffalo Soldiers in college?" And I have an extended major in history and a major in biology. And I told him nothing. He looked at me and he said, "I wasted my damn money." And he walked out of the room. I didn't know what to say. So I asked Mom, I said, "Mom, what did Dad do in the Army?" She said, "I don't know, but it had something to do with horses. He was in the cavalry." But I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was in the cavalry. And so that's when I started my research, a little bit at a time. And then I went with my dad to an old Buffalo Soldier meeting in Kansas City. And there were old Buffalo Soldiers there. And they were sitting around talking, and I was a fly on the wall. And they were swapping these stories about Buffalo Soldiers when they were in. And finally one of the old gentleman looked at me and he said, "Son, they don't know about us." He said, "But you tell our story. Somebody's got to tell our story." And I promised him that I would. And it's been a process that I do every day. I study about Buffalo Soldiers and do research on Buffalo Soldiers every day. I have more material about Buffalo Soldiers than probably anyone anywhere. And people all over the United States call me to get information about the Buffalo Soldiers. And I just keep looking. I do genealogy and things like that, and I put all the pieces together, and I found all the history that I can, because I want to keep that promise to my dad and the other gentleman, because I was so disappointed when he was disappointed in me. Why weren't their stories told? They couldn't write their own stories, because the men who became Buffalo Soldiers originally couldn't read or write until they put chaplains in the Army to teach them how to write. So they couldn't write their own stories. And then there were people who served with the Buffalo Soldiers, who were the officers, who could write the stories. And some of them started to write some really good stories about the men that they served with. And not one-sided from an officer's viewpoint and a soldier's viewpoint, just about the soldier in particular, and give us some information about the men they served with. And that was when the stories started to come out. The reason that there were white officers instead of black officers, because they felt that the white officers could handle the troops better, and the black soldiers couldn't take very many orders and could not carry them out, and would be horrible soldiers. The black soldiers were an experiment. A lot of the soldiers thought that they would fail and wished that they would fail. And so what they did, which hindered them for a long time, is that they only put white officers in charge of the Buffalo Soldiers who were from the South, because they felt that being from the South and them owning slaves, that they knew how to handle these black men better. And that was just like putting kerosene on fire. It did not work. They treated them just like that they were slaves out in the field. And they didn't have success until they started putting chaplains in the army with the black soldiers and trying to explain to them what the officers were trying to tell them to do and what they needed to do to become successful, because they were experimental troop. A lot of officers thought they couldn't do it and that they would just fail. But it didn't happen that way. It took me a long time to figure out how I was going to tell this story. We could be infantry and kind of tell the story of the infantry, but my dad was a Buffalo soldier. Didn't realize it would take me 2 years of research to figure out the kind of equipment they wore, the kind of saddles they rode, the kind of horses they rode, the size of horse they rode, what the uniform looked like, what years I was going to portray, and then who I needed to portray. And that took 2 years of planning, to just putting everything down on paper. Make sure I had every T crossed and every I dotted. What kind of guys would I get for this unit? Because I wanted guys to be able to ride really well, shoot really well, and do all of these things that they needed to do. So I started recruiting men. And so I recruited rodeo cowboys. Then, because I went looking for black rodeo cowboys. And they came to the meetings and they said they would do those things. And then every time I had a show lined up, they read a rodeo. So then I decided I would take young guys that would want to ride. But I couldn't find any young guys because they were too busy doing what young guys do. So then I had to take guys who were 40 years old and probably older, who wanted to learn history, wanted to help me tell the story. So I started taking guys who couldn't ride, and I would tell them, we'll teach you how to ride, and we'll teach you the history on the other hand. And the reason I could teach them is because I've trained 4 world champion horses. So I'm a horse trainer and everything else I did on the side. And I train people's horses, but I train them for fun. I train them just because to see if I could do it. That was the challenge that I had. So I knew I could teach the guys how to ride. My daughter's a world champion equitation rider. And my granddaughter is coming along right behind us, so she's going to do a good job too. But we ride. We're a riding family. So I knew all about the horses. So that part I knew, to make sure the guys had good horses that they could ride, that they could depend on, teach them the history, and then find guys who were dedicated to do it and wanted to spend their own money to help me tell the story. Now that's the kicker right there. You know, we're a nonprofit. I couldn't afford to do all those kinds of things out of my pocket, even though I've done a lot of things out of my pocket. They have to pay for the gas to go to a show. Pay for the gas to them to this one. You know, and then we try to make sure that once we get them there, we try to feed them in some way. So we can at least feed them while they're there and help us do the show and help us tell the story. So it's a dedication on their part to find guys that are willing to do that. And you can't find very many guys to do that. And my guys are very, very dedicated They like telling the history, and they want to learn more. And they will do anything to tell the story of the Buffalo Soldiers correctly and accurately.
So glad he chose the 7th and not the 9th.
We enjoy telling the story so much because we like the reaction of the crowd. We like to answer the question that they have because we had as much fun learning the history as we do teaching it. Because we're trying to teach them things that they don't know, and we're not trying to say, hey, you're blind, you should know this. It's just that I was just dumbfounded I had all these degrees, and I still didn't know anything about Buffalo Soldiers.
If you're a soldier back then, an African American back then, one thing that you worried about was your health. Well, if you joined the Army, what health they had there, what doctors they had there, you were able to have some sort of health taken care of. If you were sick, that was taken care of. 1. 2, education. The Army provided them, each black regiment, with a chaplain whose job not only was to meet their religious need, but to help them learn, to educate them. So some joined because education was there. Others joined because we have nowhere else to go. You got a roof over your head, you got clothes on your back, you get 3 meals a day, and you get a chance maybe to ride a horse. So there are many different reasons why they joined, but they all had one mission in mind once they did join. They understood clearly that their purpose, their mission, would be looked upon by everyone, and whatever they did would reflect on the entire African American race. They all came to that conclusion.
A lot of men were looking for something different. They had been enslaved, so they wanted something to do where they could just not be told every day when to get up, when to open their eyes, how long to work from sunrise to sunset. At least the Army, you got a chance to rest when your duty was over. You weren't on duty 24 hours a day, or when you went to bed, you were so tired you're not going to wake up the next morning. So they joined the Army, and they got paid. They didn't get paid before. And they got a new uniform, and they got 3 square meals a day. They thought that was the best thing that could happen to them, was to be in the military.
There are a lot of contradictions in the way that Native American people, and even our family, feels about how the Buffalo Soldiers treated Indians and the way that it worked. In positions, our northern brothers and sisters from the Uwinna and Ure tribe, which is in Utah, they have a very different view than we do. Those Buffalo Soldiers weren't there much to help. They were, in many ways, considered part of the problem. They were sent there to keep them in line when very terrible things were happening. They didn't know the circumstances, and by they, I mean the Buffalo Soldiers didn't know the circumstance. They were simply there to put down or quell an uprising at the Meeker Massacre, and that was a very difficult position to be put in. Not only for them, but for the Utes as well, because they didn't know the actions that Meeker and other people had taken. And so in doing so, they were simply seen as on the other side. They were seen as the bad guys. And they fought and killed Utes because it was their mandate. They were brought in from Wyoming to have those battles. Now, in our area, it was much different. They were in the area, Buffalo Soldiers were in the area near Fort Garland. And in the Fort Garland area, they were much more peacekeepers, keeping Anglos from taking our land or going over and damaging our food sources or those kinds of things. And also keeping the Hispanics and others from battles in the San Luis Valley area over resources and water and other things with the Utes. And so our tribes, the Mwach, the Capote, and the Weminuche, saw it much differently.
A lot of mistakes were made by the United States Army. Being insensitive. being inexperienced leaders. And that created a void and that the Native Americans could not understand. Native Americans were true to their word. And I'm sure the soldiers were true to theirs. But politics always get involved. And the soldiers have no control over politics. So what brought the 9th Cavalry here for 2 reasons. 1, to keep the Native Americans under control. And 2, to protect the Native Americans on the reservation. Their job was to do both. And it's a dichotomy. They want you to protect the same people that they want you to keep control over. It was a difficult job. And they did it as best they possibly could. I want to move the conversation over a little bit into Colorado because I want to discuss 2 pretty events, major events for that matter, that occurred here in our wonderful state. One involved the 9th Cavalry, the other one involved the 10th Cavalry. And in my opinion, as I researched this again and again, I kept telling myself, this could have been avoided. It did not have to happen, but it did. It begins with the Colorado Territory. Governor John Evans. John Evans was a very, very bright man. John Evans started off in Illinois, and while in Illinois, he created Northwestern University. The same Northwestern that's there today. He came to Colorado later on, and he set up what is known now as the University of Denver. He was a bright man, but he had his evil too, his demons. He did not like the Native Americans. He was receiving a lot of pressure from the outlining people who lived outside, the farmers, the ranchers. They were being attacked over and over and over again. Why were they being attacked? Because all of a sudden these people had came from the east, invading the hunting territory, the fishing territory of the Native Americans. And more were coming. Think about this. You wake up one morning and on your front lawn there's a tent. And you say, okay, it's just one tent, 2 people. You wake up the next day and look out the back window, there are 2 tents. And you go, oh, well, maybe that's a little bit more. Then on the side, another tent, and the next, pretty soon you got 12 tents in your yard. Or you're going to stand there and go, okay, I can put up with this, right? That's going to anger you. You're going to want to do something about it. So the Native Americans decided they were going to do something about it. So what Evans did, after he felt so much pressure, Governor Evans decided to hire Major Shervington in 1864. Recruited 650 men for 100 days. Their mission was to eradicate the Native Americans. As a matter of fact, Shervington's words were, they don't understand treaties and they don't know how to honor a treaty. Funny, isn't that? Because every treaty that's been broken between the Native Americans and the United States, it was the United States that broke them first. But at any rate, that's where Shervington was coming from. So, government said, if you don't come in, we're going to consider you a hostile, and if you are hostile, we will kill you. So Black Kettle, the left hand, brought his tribe in to meet with Governor Evans to say, we don't want to fight, let's have a treaty. Evans said, we're not having a treaty, it's too late for that. I'm preparing for the war. But he sent him over to Fort Lyons. At Fort Lyons, there was a major there by the name of Scott Anthony, who also agreed with Shervington. He sent them to Sand Creek, and then sent a messenger to Shervington saying, they are over at Sand Creek. So Shervington took his men to Sand Creek early one morning. He attacked the village. Well, most of the braves had gone out on a hunting trip. Women, children, and older men came through and slaughtered as many of them as they possibly could. Black Kettle was on next to his tent, waving a white flag next to an American flag that Lincoln had given him, and they shot him. He didn't die, he was able to escape. Then they came back to Denver, and they came back being honored. So everyone was cheering. We finally got rid of them. But there were 2 officers who chose not to allow their men to attack the village. And they told the story, the true story of what happened at Sand Creek. And in telling the story, the word got out more and more. And these gentlemen men who believed very strongly they were heroes, they finally got their due. They found out that actually they were killing women, children, and babies, not warriors. And the disturbing thing, what happened to those who perpetrated this? Evans, who wanted to be the senator of the state of Colorado, they forced him to resign. Didn't go to jail, he just resigned his post as governor. Sherrington, all he got was he lost his military command and he couldn't no longer be a member of the military. No one went to prison. 270 Native Americans were killed during that onslaught, and not one person went to prison. The judge said that was the worst autocracy that could ever happen by one human being to another. The massacre at Sand Creek. Now, why do I say it all could have been avoided? Because that began the next phase of the Indian Wars. That angered those Native American tribes who were still out there. So much that tribes who didn't get along with each other band together and began to wage war. Why did that happen? I say, 1, you had inexperienced leaders as we go into the next phase. 2, they were insensitive. And 3, they were arrogant. We'll start with General Winfield Hancock. He was the commander of the Department of Missouri, which include Colorado, Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. Sure, the Native Americans were upset. They were angry, very angry. So he decided he was going to meet with them. So he met with them, a group of chiefs, and they agreed they would sit down and have peace talk. Then he decided after that he was going to go all the way to Piney Forks here and have a meeting with them. What happened there were a lot of Native Americans there who were at Sand Creek. And of course, Winfield came with 600 troops. So what were the Native Americans to do? They ran because they suspected something bad was going to happen to them. What did he do? He got mad instead of trying to understand why they ran. He became insulted. And he told the chiefs who were there, go get them and bring them back. So they went to try to bring them back, could not do it. So they came back without him. He had a tantrum and burned the village down. More fuel to the fire. Insensitive. Told the State Department that he suspected that there were a lot of spies in there spying on the American government. So he's justified by burning down the entire camp. He was replaced, by the way, real quickly because that did not stop the Indians from fighting. They just got more angry and came back. And then what happened was they replaced him with Sheridan. And Sheridan had Medicine Lodge Treaty, where he had them in, And they came in and they all agreed. Everything was right there on the table. We all agreed that this is what we're going to do. But one thing got in the way. The federal government. They did not deliver the goods that were agreed upon. Then what the Native Americans had to do, they had to go out and rustle cattle to eat because the food that was supposed to deliver wasn't delivered. What did that do? That made the ranchers mad. That made the farmers mad. We got another Stonewall effect. Again, arrogance. We did not pay attention. So that what happened next was real simple. Had Hancock paid attention, listen to their problem, listen what was going on, got the treaty set, not burn the village, which didn't help, we may have been able to eliminate that part, but he did not. What happened in Beecher Island was this. Sheridan had just taken over. Sheridan was a smart man. He knew that you can see 300 soldiers coming down the road, 2 in a row. You can see them for miles because the dust is going to be all up there, right? You got 200 horses moving around, it's going to be dusty. So he had this brilliant idea. What I'm going to do, he said, I'm going to get 50 of the best frontier men. I'm going to arm them with the best weapons. And we're going to go out and we're going to seek and destroy. That was their mission. Seek and destroy. He chose George Forsyth, Major George Forsyth, and to command the 6th Scouts. And Lieutenant Beecher was his backup. They were armed with repeating rifles, the best rifles man could make. And they took out of Fort Lloyd, Kansas, coming into Colorado. Came across a trail, you say cut a trail, which is about a quarter path wide. Jack Stilwell was the head scout. He took a look at the trail and he went, "Sir, this is bigger than just a war party." But Forsyth said, we came here to fight Indians. We're going to go forward. Of course, the scouts went along with him. Inexperience, right? Ignorance, right? Arrogant, right? We're going to go because we came here to do this. As they traveled along, the path got wider and wider. It was no longer a war party. It was a total village. And the night they camped along the Riki River on an island right there in the middle. The river had already dried up. But they camped there and there were willow trees that they could tie the horses to. And they camped there that night. They woke up the next morning to yells of war cry. The Native Americans was coming in to take the horses. They were able to protect the first slot for the horses so that they didn't steal them. But the Native Americans were smart. If they couldn't get them the first time, they came through the second time, and this time they shot them. Shot every horse. You can hear the horses screaming and yelling. They shot every horse, knowing at that point in time they could not get away nor pursue them. They were in this hole. During the first phase, Beecher, who they named the island out for from Durango, Colorado, he was shot in the chest. Dead. Boom. Forsyth's first wound was in the leg. As he tried to limp to the doctor, he got shot in the other leg. He fell in the ground. He was laying there, and one soldier tried to help him up. They shot at him again, and it creased his skull, but they got him to protection. He yelled for the doctor. The doctor got up to come get him. Gone. Doctor was shot. And there they were. So they used the dead animals to protect themselves, to build a breastplate, to hide behind, to fight. Forsyth asked for volunteers. Stilwell volunteered. He volunteered to go out, try, and find help. And he's famous because what Stilwell did was unusual. When he left the camp, he walked backwards so that if his trail was seen, it looked like he was going forward. And he was able to go The first people he came in contact with was Major Lewis Carpenter, 9th Cavalry. They came thundering in one morning when they thought it was all over. They came in one morning, and at that time the Native Americans had chose to back off. They were no longer interested. But when they got there, it was 6 days later, they were starving, so they bought them food. They had no more materials to take care of the wounded. They bought them there. So they came in and rescued them. And to give you an example, 4 years ago, we did a reenactment at Beecher Island. During that reenactment, the community invited all of the not ancestors, but all of the offspring of the soldiers who were there and the scouts who were caught on that island. They were well aware that when we got there for the reenactment, that it was the 9th Cavalry is the reason why they were still here that day. Because had the 9th Cavalry hadn't gotten there in time, those soldiers and those scouts would have perished. And they would not have ever been on this earth. True story. It went so well, we went back the next year to celebrate the 150th year. But again, Forsyth, had he not been so arrogant, listened to his scout, understanding the situation, that battle would have been avoided. Again, inexperience, arrogance, again, my words, and insensitivity. The next battle happened at Milk Creek. Nathan Meeker chose to be the Indian agent at the White River Indian Agency. Nathan was a stern man, a tough man. He was unbending. He wanted the Native Americans to be farmers, not hunters. He would not give in. He got the job because he had borrowed money from Horace Greeley to build the city of Greeley. He wanted to build the city of Greeley on his philosophy, a farming community where everyone farmed. He wanted to do that with the White River Agency Indians as well. The Native Americans resisted for a while, and he kept calling the army and writing the governor. He kept complaining that they wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. So what he decided to do was, these White River Native Americans loved their horses. They loved them. And they would have races, and they had beautiful horses. They'd race against the ranchers because they were all friends. So Horace couldn't get them to do what he wanted them to do. So he went out and took the best pasture that they had, that they fed their horses with, and started to grind it up into farmland. So the Native Americans said, okay, we'll meet you halfway. We'll plant. He did not want to listen. Either going to be my way or no way at all. So they became angry. He realized that. So he made his last call to Sheridan to bring troops in. So Sheridan sent in a young man by the name of Major Thomas Thornburg. Thornburg was a young for a major. Back then, he was a major in his 30s. Most people didn't get to private till they were 30. He was already a major. But he came in with 191 troops. He assumed he outnumbered the Ute Indians who were there, which at the time he did. So he realized this long trail of 190 men and 360 mules were not moving very fast. So he divided his company in half. And he left the wagons there to come in slowly while he rode a herd ahead. Well, he had heard from one of the General Store officers that the Native Americans had been in buying ammunition, thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition and guns. Jack leader of one of the Ute nations, said, if you cross Milk Creek, we will look at that as an act of war. Thornburg agreed. He said, okay, I won't do that. And he sent a message to Meeker that they would be there, but they would be there. They would not cross the creek. They would meet him there. So everything seemed to be okay. But as they got closer and closer to the river, things started to change. Thornburg got there and decided, well, I'm going to go across because I believe something bad is going to be happening. Well, at the same time, the moment he crossed the river, the Native Americans at the agency panicked. And they said, oh, he's coming to get us. So they killed everyone there. And they took the women and children away. Once Thornburg crossed Mill Creek, the Native Americans opened fire from above. Again, shot the horses. They were stuck there in Milk Creek. Nowhere to go. And they stayed there for 3 days. Captain Scott, was the one who survived. Thornburg rode down, coming back to get his troop. He was killed immediately. Captain Scott Payne took charge. He asked for volunteers. He sent out 3, hoping one would get 2 that night before. They went out. It took 3 to 4 days before they met, guess who? The 9th Cavalry, right outside of Pagosa Spring. They were on bivouac. They heard the story. They knew 36 Buffalo soldiers. They rode 72 hours. Now, let me clarify that. It wasn't for 72 hours. That's not how the cavalry operate. You ride, you walk, you trot, you ride, you walk. But 72 hours they rode to get to Mill Creek. Once they got there and they came over to here, you could hear the cheers from the soldiers who were trapped. They were on their last piece of dead animal meat because it had been rotting in the sun by then. And the flies were terrible. But they came riding in and they heard the cheers. The Utes did not shoot at them, to their surprise. They rode into camp and they dismounted and they tried to put their horses away. And then the action happened. They started to shoot their horses too. Every mount was killed. And they were there as well. So they used the animals to protect themselves and defend their position. The second night they were there were 25 to 30 wounded. Sergeant John Henry Johnson, 9th Cavalry, took it upon himself after he crawled by his men to make sure they all were all right on the front line, the first line of defense. He crawled down to the river, as the story goes, filled canteens up full of water, and returned it back so that the sick and wounded could have a drink. And he was known to have said after that, "I be powerful thirsty myself, so I go get some water for those who are powerfully thirsty and the sick and the wounded." And because of that heroic act, on that night at Milk Creek, that's when Sergeant Henry Johnson received, you can see it there, the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroics under fire. I want to thank you very, very much for your patience and your understanding. I know that I bored you to death at times, but I want to tell that story, and I have such a passion for it. And I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share it with you. It means so much to us. And if you know more about the Buffalo Soldiers at the end of our demonstration than you did before you got here, then we have completed our mission. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that they left here, first of all, with the understanding the Buffalo Soldiers cared about their country. even though they were African American as well as the white soldier, one. Two, I wanted them to know that they made a difference on how the West was settled. And number three, I wanted them to enjoy learning, to learn something and have fun at it, and feel a part of what is going on.
Survival, moving, getting better, improving. That's what the Buffalo Soldiers were about. It's what they are still about. It's what this moment in time means. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time. And bless all of you.
Thank you for sharing.
The Buffalo Soldiers of the American West want to present this plaque to John. It says, John Taylor Valdez and the Ute community, in recognition and appreciation of your devotion and dedication, commitment to keeping the Ute history and culture alive. Buffalo Soldiers of the American West, September 16, 2023. To you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
I think he was surprised.
That's beautiful. People need to come together about history. They need to come together about the truth. All people have had this recognition of history having good and bad in it. When you've seen a lot of oppression in your life, you only want to tell your story and you don't want to be involved in anyone else's story. And that's unfortunate because I think there's such a rich connection. Even if it may have been negative at one point, it is much more positive now. The truth about history is that we can always find more about ourselves from history, and that we can recognize that other people's history makes ours even richer. It's all human history. Yes.
Women disguised themselves in almost every war. And it was pretty easy to do because the Army officers just wanted somebody who could hold a weapon. There was no age limit. If you could walk, breathe, and hold a weapon, if you were a young man, you could pretty much join any of these regiments that were pretty much from the different states.
And get you on the train tomorrow, because they will be riding on the train tomorrow. We're looking forward to spending that time with them.
Because of the gold that they discovered out here, they had to protect the settlers who were here. Which was the sign of that time.
Sure, you want to be at a HS, dude. That's crazy.
Taking from black powder to cartridge. The cartridge round is soon replaced.
Carry arms. Order. Arms.
You'll see Native people doing this all the time, and you wonder, well, why are they doing that? They're taking in the spirit of things. And then when you bring it, I'll take it from you. I'll take all of those things that are bothering you, anything that worries you, take it and we'll burn it in the sun.
She's painting that. Man, that's beautiful.
And she's donating it.
I think she was in Pogosa Springs.
The black soldiers in the tent during the night. And that was just like putting kerosene on fire because they were used to treating those soldiers from the South in a particular way because they treated them harshly.
Right.
And that kind of went over into the 9th Cavalry because the officers were...
Okay.